Hi there, I'm John Quarterman. I'm the Sewanee Riverkeeper. Sorry, I'm a little soggy. I was picking grapes. Um, this is our continuing series of WWALS webinars in which we have someone speak about an interesting topic in the Sewanee River Basin from noon to 1 p.m., usually on Thursdays, usually the second or third Thursday of the month. These are organized by Janet Martin, our membership director. Maybe we should make her education director as well. She's a board member, and she's going to introduce our speaker. So over to you, Janet.
Okay, good afternoon. Today we're going to hear about some bats and some small critters in Georgia. Today, Sam, a wildlife biologist, will be with us. He's currently working with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. He attended Murray State University, where he completed his BS in Wildlife and Conservatory Biology in 2020. He began studying bats in 2019 with an internship with a professor in Kentucky. Following that internship, he worked as a seasonal technician for Copperhead Consulting and the Georgia DNR, working with multiple bat monitoring projects. So let's hear from Sam. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm going to share my screen and get my presentation pulled up. Okay, can everybody see that?
I see it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now when my presentation pulls up, I can't see my face anymore, so I just wanted to make sure everybody could see it. So today we're going to talk about supporting bats of Georgia, and I know that this group had a bat talk last year that's recorded on the website, so I wanted to add a little bit to it. So we're also going to talk about a few small mammals that are found in South Georgia that I don't think a lot of people know about. So bats are in the order Chiroptera, and if you break that word down, Chiroptera means hand, wing, Chiro meaning hand, and Ptera meaning wing. Bats show up in the fossil record about 50 million years ago. And then since then, they've stuck around, and we have over 1,400 species today. They're in that order Chiroptera because the bones in their wing are the same bones that we have in our hand, or that other mammals have in their hand. So looking at this diagram on the right, with the different colors representing different bones, metacarpals and phalanges, we can see how a bat's wing is just these skinny modified fingers. So they have 5 fingers like we do, and it creates that shape of their wing. So looking at this picture on the left, we have the long humerus here, and then their long forearm. This is their little wrist. Can you guys see my cursor when I'm pointing at things?
I do not see your cursor. Oh, yes, I do.
Okay, so this here in the photo is its wrist, and the little claw is his thumb. Bats are our only flying mammal, and when I say that to people, sometimes people bring up flying squirrels. But if you look at this shape of this squirrel versus this bat over here, it's very different. It doesn't have true wings. It just has this big membrane here, different than a wing membrane of a bat. So these guys are actually just gliding from tree to tree as they forage at night. Whereas the bats have a true wing and are capable of true flight. Sustained flight is very energetically costly. Bats are flying around all night trying to catch insects, and they're burning a lot of energy while they're doing that. So because of that, different bats that utilize different areas have different wing morphology. So a bat that you might see with like a big, wide, kind of bulky wing, like this top one in this photo over here, they're better at agility. So they might be using more cluttered areas. And in bat biology, when we say clutter, we're talking about vegetation. So instead of flying in wide open areas, they might be in kind of thicker areas with smaller flight paths, because they can pick up more like wind when they're flying, like hold on to the air better, and make more quick turns and get around trees easier. Whereas something like this photo on the bottom left, it's a very thin, streamlined wing. These are high flying bats that are really quick. So talking about the skinny wing, this photo here is of a Brazilian free-tailed bat. One of the coolest bats, very common here in Georgia, but they're also very fast flyers. They can fly, they've been tracked in flight when they get really high up in catching some air currents that they have sustained flights of nearly 100 miles an hour, making this species the fastest true flying animal on Earth. And another thing, when I mention the fastest flying animal on Earth, people bring up the peregrine falcon, which does technically reach much higher speeds than 100 miles an hour, but they aren't truly flying. They're just diving down from high areas. So it's not true sustained flight that's actually that fast for the peregrine. I'm sure you've all heard that bats use sonar, or what we call echolocation. Also here, people say that bats are blind and they use their sonar. That's not true. Bats can actually see about as good as we can, but they use the echolocation to pick up on very small insects when they're flying, and pick up on their surroundings while they're flying really fast at night. So I try to think about this like, if I was in the woods at night and it's starting to get dark, with my own eyes, I can't see very well. And if I was trying to run down a path and not run into any trees, I wouldn't make it very far. And that's kind of how it works with the bats. Using their echolocation, they can sense their environment in a different way, and be able to process their environment while also seeking out prey at the same time. Some of our smallest bats' echolocation calls are actually so loud that if they were in our range of hearing, they would be as loud as holding a smoke detector while it's going off right next to their ear. So they're very noisy, but they're out of our range of hearing. So this little spectrogram here is what a bat call looks like. So when they're flying around, they're constantly chattering, and this is what the pulses of their call look like. And if you look at this on the left side here, 20K, that's 20 kilohertz. That's where humans stop hearing. We can't hear above that line. So looking at this call, almost the entirety of that call, besides a couple of the lowest points here, we wouldn't even be able to hear. And this is one of our lower bats with lower frequency calls. What else I find fascinating about this, if we look at the time down here on the bottom axis, this is in seconds. So all of those pulses happened in just 0.2 seconds. And I had a little video here of just a bat that we're working up, and this is the species that would have made this call here. Okay, moving on to just talking about some diversity in bats across the world. So this photo here shows bats from all over the world. We have all different types of facial structures and ears and noses. But looking at this photo, I just want to point out a couple things. So we have, like I said, bats that call really loud. They're usually loud and have smaller ears. But you look at this guy down here with these really big ears. This is the spotted bat, which is found in the western United States. It has these massive ears. It actually has a really quiet echolocation call. And then in turn, it has these giant ears to pick up on that. Whereas these guys, my other guys with smaller ears, may be really loud, and that's how they can get that echolocation call back to process the environment. I also want to point out this guy in the top right corner. even though there's a lot of diversity here, this one stands out a little bit if you look closely. See, it has small ears, really big eyes relative to its face compared to these other bats, and it has a long dog-like snout. This is actually what we call flying fox. That's from Southeast Asia and Australia, some of these species. And they actually don't echolocate like all of our bats do here in the United States. So they have better vision, and these are fruit bats. So they use their sense of smell way more than other species of bats do to seek out big fruit trees, and the whole colony will go there and sometimes wipe out a whole fruit tree in one night. And into a little more of the diversity of bats worldwide. I mentioned this earlier, but there's about 1,400 species across the world and on every continent except for Antarctica. We have 47 species here in the United States. And in some parts of the world, it's the only native mammal on islands. Like Hawaii, it's the Hawaiian hoary bat, this top right picture. And that's the only native mammal to Hawaii. Of course, over the years, many different species have been introduced there, but naturally, this was the only one that was found there. And across the world, 70% of bats are insectivorous, including all of our bats here in Georgia. They all eat insects. And here we have on the bottom left is the largest bat in the United States. Sorry, not in the United States, in the world. We don't have this one here. This is that one that's in Southeast Asia and Australia. And it has wingspans of just shy of 6 feet, which is crazy to me because our bats are way smaller than that. And then this picture here in the middle is Kitty's hognose bat, or a bumblebee bat. It's kind of known as both, also found in Southeast Asia. And it's the smallest bat species in the world, just weighing like 2 or 3 grams. And then this picture here I put on the bottom right just to remind myself to tell you that bats are not rodents. Like I mentioned earlier, they're in the order Chiroptera, not the order Rodentia. A lot of people are scared of bats or grossed out by them because they think of them as just flying mice, but they're actually very far, like distantly related from rodents. Their whole life history is different. Bats breed really slowly, usually only having one pup a year, so their populations grow slowly, and then they're relatively long-lived. Bats live at least a few years for some species. I think the oldest species of small bat found in the United States was around 40 years old in the wild. Whereas when you think about rodents, they breed really fast, have a bunch of young. Sometimes they can start breeding after just a few months, so their life histories are very different from each other. Here are the 16 species of bats we have in Georgia. We have 3 endangered species that you can see here in red: the Indiana bat, the gray bat, and the northern long-eared bat. All have had significant population declines, at least at some point in time. The gray bat is just proposed for delisting from the Endangered Species Act from good conservation measures. So some bats that have been in major decline have been from disease, but the gray bat specifically, they roost in really large colonies in caves, and bad cave etiquette started their decline. Just people not, respecting the cave environment, and just habitat loss in general of good cave roosts. So over time, with people putting up cave gates to block out the general public from using caves, and just some good conservation efforts, the gray bat population seem to be stable again. So that will probably be coming off the endangered species list soon. This one in the top right corner, the tricolored bat, is proposed endangered. It has not gotten listed officially yet, but it has seen drastic declines throughout the United States and in North Georgia. This is a species that's found statewide, and they seem to be doing a little bit better on the coast and South Georgia compared to other states, just because of that warm climate. This species goes all the way up into the Northeast, so in those colder zones, they're not doing as well as here in Georgia. And then I also want to point out that not all bats use caves all the time. This top row, the tricolor bat does use caves, but all the other bats here in the top row are tree roosters. So they'll roost in the trees in the wintertime as well as the summertime. Um, so yeah, they will just roost out in the foliage of trees, like this Seminole bat and this yellow bat, and the hoary bat just clinging onto branches. Um, or I sometimes when it gets cold enough, some of these bats will actually go and hide underneath leaf litter, but they never go to caves. Most of the other bats in this do go to caves in the wintertime or at some point during their life. So I just showed us all of the bats that we have here in Georgia, and those are all insectivores, but bats are very diverse in what they eat across the world. So we have some carnivorous bats, like these two bats on the left. This one's eating some kind of mouse. And this bottom left one is a fringe-lipped bat. They are frog specialists. I actually caught one when I was in Costa Rica doing my very first bat work ever. When they found it in the net, it had frog legs hanging out of its mouth. Very cool. But that one, these carnivorous bats have really big teeth compared to our insectivores. This one in the bottom right corner also specializes on a certain prey, and it actually eats fish. So it still uses echolocation like our bats, but it will determine where fish are close to the surface and then swoop down and with these giant back feet scoop up fish. These two other ones at the top, we have a lot of bats across the world are fruit eaters. So we have fruit bats in the New World and in the Old World. Different life histories, but they still eat fruit. Then we have some bats in Central and South America and even the southwestern United States that pollinate plants. And then this one in the bottom middle is the infamous vampire bat. I get that question a lot if they actually exist, and it's true, we do have vampire bats in the world, but over the 1,400 species we have worldwide, only 3 bats species are vampire bats, and they're all in Central and South America. And between those 3, only one of them actually preys on mammals. The other 2 are bird specialists. So it's a little scary, but not likely to ever encounter one. So they're very diverse in what they eat across the world, but bats are also very diverse in how they roost. Like I was mentioning, just with our bats, some don't use caves. This big picture in the middle obviously is a giant cave roost. And then the 2 below it, some bats like to tuck underneath bark or use tree hollows. And then we have foliage roosting species here on the left. But there's some weird species that do some really strange things or specialized things in different parts of the world. This top left photo is a woolly bat in Southeast Asia, and they roost inside of pitcher plants, and they will actually poop while they're sleeping or hanging in there in the pitcher plant, and then their guano will attract insects for the pitcher plant to consume. So it's like a symbiotic relationship, and they're both helping out with each other. And then this really cool white bat on the right is the Honduran white bat. They are in Central and South America. I was lucky enough to see one of these while I was in Costa Rica as well. And they're really cool because they make their roost. So they roost under big banana leaves, and they'll actually chew on the midrib of the leaf and make the leaf like bend over and make like a little tent. So they're also called tent making bats because of that. And what bats can do to help us. So there's lots of ecosystem services that bats do across the world that benefit us. First one, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but pollination. Why is that good for us? I mean, besides keeping great genetic diversity of plants and helping out other native species by pollinating, they are also the sole pollinator of the agave plant, which is pretty interesting. I mean, there's probably some insects that pollinate it as well, but they are the primary pollinator of agave. And so agave is what is used to make tequila. So without bats, we wouldn't have tequila and we wouldn't have margaritas, which is really interesting. I think it was like in the 90s, some agave farms weren't doing very well. And it's because they were becoming too genetically similar. They were cutting off the flowering parts of their plants before before the plant was able to flower, meaning the bats weren't able to pollinate it. So it was losing genetic diversity in that crop. So bat biologists in Mexico started working with agave farmers to teach them the importance of the pollination and keeping that genetic diversity high in their crop. So now there's a lot of farms that once they produce a product, they'll have a bat-friendly sticker on it. So just something to think about when you're shopping. Bat-friendly stickers on things are always good. Seed dispersal. This isn't one that we really see here in the United States because we don't have fruit bats, but in areas of deforestation, especially in tropical areas, the majority of the initial regrowth of the area that's been deforested of these fruit trees, these native fruit trees, are from bats dropping seeds or dropping fruit while they're flying, or even eating the fruit and then pooping out the fruit while they're flying. So they're able to help forest areas quicker than we thought could happen because they're dropping these seeds all the time. Okay, this is getting into really what we see here in the United States. All of our bats eat insects, so we have a natural insecticide. There was a study done in 2011 looking at how well bats as an insecticide are and how they are benefiting crops. So they put up these big nets to keep bats out of certain areas of agricultural fields, and those areas that didn't have bats in there had a significantly larger rate of pest insects that were eating the plants. So when bats are excluded, the farmers' plants do worse. So they tried to put a number on this, which is difficult to do, but in that study, they estimated that the service that bats provide saves farmers around $23 billion annually on insecticide that they don't have to spray on their crops. And that is just on the amount that the insecticide would cost itself. That doesn't include any downstream effects that much insecticide on the landscape would be causing to our waterways or anything like that. So it's pretty significant and amazing what they do for our crops here in the United States. And that's just the US. That's not even worldwide. So I can't imagine what that number would be for the whole world. So how do we study bats at DNR? There's a few ways. We use ultrasonic bat detectors. So these have these specialized microphones on them. There's a bunch of different designs, even one that you can plug into your phone and walk around with for education events. But these specialized microphones can pick up those high ultrasonic bat calls that we can't hear. And these run off of different things. Some of them we have out long term that have solar panels, other ones just use batteries. We have technicians each summer that run routes. They put some stationary units and then they run driving routes where we connect the microphone on top of the car and listen to bats as they drive a specific route. So we drive that same route every year. So we have a standardized data set. And then we also have a volunteer program of driving routes all across the state. So if anyone's interested, you could always contact me if you want to get involved in that. We always need more volunteers for our acoustic routes. And then once we collect that data, we can upload it into a software where it can analyze the call, and the software will tell us which species it thinks it is. We do have to take this with a grain of salt, especially when it comes to some of our rare species, because the software is not perfect, but here's a couple of examples of some calls and the bats that made those calls. So this is the evening bat here on the left. See, it goes all the way up to 70 kilohertz, way above our range of hearing. And their lowest bit of their call doesn't even touch. Well, neither of these bats touch anywhere near what we could hear. But just looking at that general call structure between the evening bat on the left and this red bat on the right, you can just see that there's a big difference. So the more bat calls we can put into the system, the better the software can learn how to ID our species a little bit better. Now, acoustics is cool and fun, and you can get a lot of data from that, but my favorite part of studying bats in the summer is mist netting. So this picture on the left is kind of hard to see, but when we're looking for a mist net site, we want to funnel the bats in. So we want a lot of vegetation on each side of a flyway, and then we want vegetation on top of the flyway. So this example here, I have this nice tree with this overarching limb, vegetation on the right and the left, and then we put up our poles, and there's actually a net right here. You can't see it, especially in the daytime. It's easier to see when I shine a light on it at night, but there's a net and completely covering this road. So when bats come zooming down this, flying, looking for insects, they can get caught up in our net, which is what we see here on the right. I think this is probably an evening bat that's caught up in the top right photo, stuck in the net. And then this is not a bat, but it's something that we catch a lot. We get a lot of flying squirrels at nighttime, and they're actually one of the most common species of squirrels we have in the state, but we just don't see them because they're out at nighttime compared to gray squirrels. Then once we catch a bat and we take it to our processing station and we take some general data on it, but we first look to see if it's adult or a juvenile. And by doing this, these are some good photos that I've taken in the field. This photo on the left is an adult, and we look at this joint in their finger. So when they're an adult, that joint becomes real knobby and bony, kind of like fist shape. But when they're a juvenile, and juvenile just means young of the year, because after their first summer, like they're born, they learn to fly a few weeks later. That first summer after that, they're considered an adult, and you can't tell anything besides that. So that juvenile just means it was born that year. But looking at that joint, it's very elongated, and you can see light coming through because that joint has not fully fused like the adult. Just kind of like human babies have more bones than adults because not all of their bones have fused yet. Then we take other measurements on the bats. We'll take their weight, their sex, age, reproductive condition, depending on the time of the year, to see if we catch a female, if she's pregnant, or if she's lactating, meaning she has pups somewhere in a tree, and just take data like that. And then if we're in an area where we will be continuing to sample and we want to know if we're catching the same individuals or not, we can put a band on it. And it's basically like a cuff bracelet that just goes over their forearm, and then it doesn't go through their wing membrane, so it can slide up and down. So that's what that little metal thing is on the arm there in both of these photos. And this one on the right, you can see that it doesn't go all the way through. It just cinches down just enough that it can't pop up over that forearm. And then if we catch rare species, or if we're doing a certain project targeting species that we want to track, we can apply a transmitter to the bat. So if you look here, the thumb is kind of covering up the transmitter, but you can see a little bit of the glue. So we'll glue that transmitter on, and then this is the little antenna that will give us a signal. Here's a picture of me tracking bats. So we use this antenna and receiver. That transmitter on the bat will send off a specific frequency sound, and then it will ping the receiver, and it will make a noise. And I can tell which direction by the strength of the noise, or that ping, which direction the bat is. So then you can walk around until we get a really strong signal at a tree, and then try to find the bat in the tree. So this example here on the right is a northern long-eared bat that I tracked, and it's tucked up under this bark. You can barely see it, that's why I have this labeled here, but there's a little face there. Really, you can see the transmitter antenna curling around, and that band is what you can see the most. So that's one way of tracking. That's what I've done the most, is tracking on ground, local movements, looking at how bats use certain trees. But there's also a new project that I'm really excited about, called MODIS. We're in the very early stages of using this for bats. MODIS is a way to track long distance migration, and it's been primarily used for birds, but bat biologists are just tapping into this for some of our migratory species, which I have not been lucky enough to catch yet. This picture in the middle is what a tower looks like. So this is a Georgia Forestry Commission tower, and we put these big antennas on there, and it goes to our little station called a sensor station. So if a tagged individual comes within a certain distance of this tower, like the study I was doing, where I was doing it by hand, when it gets that ping, instead of me being out there looking for it, that ping will send it to the system and automatically get uploaded to the website that individual pinged close to that tower. So this photo on the left is what a migration looks like. This is actually an American kestrel that was tagged in Maine, and it hit all of these towers. Each white dot is a tower that it went near, and it came all the way down, and it pinged on one of our towers in Georgia. So it's really cool. We're just getting into it. I helped build, I think, 12 towers across Georgia last year. So now we have this nice detection fence, is what we call it. So hopefully, if we can catch one of our migratory species, I can get a tag on it, and we can see where it's going in the wintertime, or maybe the opposite migration of where it's going in the summertime. So I added this kind of last minute just because I wanted to mention some of the cool bats that are in South Georgia. This one on the left I kind of mentioned earlier is that tricolored bat. It's not doing well and proposed for the endangered species list, but it is still doing pretty well in South Georgia. That's primarily due to the fact that we have warmer winters in the South, so these bats are able to forage and still eat in the wintertime. And we don't have a lot of caves down there. So I'll talk about it in one of the next slides, but there's a disease in Georgia that's killing a lot of the cave roosting bats. So the bats in South Georgia are either just using trees all year round, or they're just going into culverts or something that's not as thermally stable as a cave to produce that disease that's killing them. These two species in the middle, it's actually two different species that look very similar. This bottom one here is the Seminole bat, and this top one is the red bat. That red bat is one of the most common bats in the whole United States. But once you get into the South, especially South Georgia, you kind of stop seeing the red bat as much.
How you doing?
And you really start seeing the Seminole bat here. So they kind of have this range separation. Seminole bat, I think, is a little prettier, has a little darker hair, and it's like frosted tips. It's really pretty. That's what, at my last job, I did a tracking study on these guys to see what trees they use. It was really fun getting to work with them all the time. And then this bat on the right is the northern yellow bat. It is strictly coastal, so it really might not be technically hitting the range that you guys are in or around the Okefenokee, but they barely go inland at all. You can find them in South coastal Georgia, and they may go inland a little bit, but they like to roost in palmetto trees and Spanish moss. So we don't get to see those very much unless we're in specific areas or on the barrier islands. So what threats are bats facing today? Why do we have a bat that's proposed for endangered? Mostly is due to white nose syndrome here in Georgia. Habitat loss is also huge worldwide. I think habitat loss is the biggest threat to bats throughout the world. But here in Georgia, we're seeing some major declines from this disease called white nose syndrome. It's caused by this fungus with this really long name called Pseudogymnoascus destructans. This fungus, it came from Europe. We don't really know a ton about like the origins, or we might just be learning about the exact origins in more recent years. It first showed up in a cave in New York, and bat biologists went in to do a survey, and there were just dead bats everywhere. And it has moved to new counties every year since then. And this map here, you can see, started in New York, kind of followed Appalachians down into Georgia. And we have some North Georgia caves that have been hit really hard. Seen usually when it hits an area, it kills about 90% of the bats, if not more, in some caves. And that's what we've seen here in Georgia for the tricolor bat, and the northern long-eared bat is another one. Those two are specifically hit hard and endangered because of this disease. There's hardly any northern long-eared bats left in Georgia, and they used to be the most common bat uh, in the state. People used to call them trash bats because when they would go out mist netting for bats, they would catch so many northern long-eared bats that they were bored of catching them. They wanted to see something cooler. And now they're basically wiped from the landscape across the country. So it's really sad. There's some remnant populations hanging on in some places, but it's not looking good. And then the tricolor bat has seen major declines as well in our caves. This past winter, there was a little uptick in the population. At least the last few years, it's been slowly increasing, but we're still maybe only at best 20% of what the population was before white nose, and that's only at a couple sites. Most sites are worse than that. This one isn't one of the biggest concerns, but it just aggravates me, so I always include it in my presentations. There's oddity stores that I see where the bats are harvested for decor, and you might see them pressed to look like a steady skin in a frame like this, or a mummified bat, or sometimes they're even like put into like epoxy, so they're just in like a clear brick of epoxy. And I don't know. I think it's unethical. All of the sources that come from say it's ethical take from these other countries, but some of the countries that these really cool bats, like this painted bat, where they're coming from, they're not regulated. So someone could just be going into a cave system and killing all these bats and then selling them for decor. And really, the laws are kind of weird about it, so no one really gets in trouble for doing this. But if you're decorating for Halloween and you see this and think it's cool, just know that it's not, and it probably wasn't done ethically or in good taste. So educate people on this. If you ever see somebody interested in something like this, just let them know that's probably not the best, and it's actually hurting some rare populations potentially. Climate change, it isn't one that's hitting our bats in the United States super hard, but in other parts of the world, I'm sure you've heard of some of these crazy forest fires happening in Australia and crazy heat waves that are happening there. The spectacled flying fox has been dying off in waves. This picture on the right is really sad, but in some of those heat waves, it just wipes out the whole population of these bats. And these are some of those really big ones. I don't think this species specifically is the one that gets 6 feet, but it's that group of bats that is doing really bad from these extreme heat waves. Wind energy. This one also is really sad. There are tons and tons of collisions with wind turbines every year. It's been killing millions of bats in the Midwest and out west, wherever these wind turbines are. And it's especially concerning to me as wind energy is moving closer and closer to the southeast. And there are proposals for wind energy offshore in the southeast. And I just think it's going to be really hard to regulate what these are killing. There's consultants do surveys in the Midwest where they walk transects and they find dead bats that have been hit by these turbines. And we're not going to be able to do that if we put these turbines in the ocean. So it's just scary. And yeah, they could actually have these run at a rate where it's not killing near as many bats if they would slow them down a little bit, but that cuts into profits. So it's a big debate right now about wind energy. It's sad to see something that seems like it is a green source of energy, but it's actually killing a lot of individuals. Birds too, it kills millions of birds as well. And just general negative opinion of bats. The majority of people I talk to outside of the wildlife field are scared of bats, or they think bats are gross, and they just don't know how good they really are for our ecosystem. Um, you know, bats can carry a lot of different diseases. So I know people are very concerned with rabies when they think about bats. I want to point out that less than 1% of bats are actually carry rabies. So even if you came into contact with a bat, you should um, seek medical treatment if you would ever get bit or scratched by a bat, just because that's a safe thing to do with any wild mammal. But it's not likely that you would ever get something like that. And in other parts of the world with Ebola and now coronavirus in recent years, bats have an amazing immune system, which makes them easy carriers for diseases because it doesn't kill them right away, and they can carry it and transfer it to spillover situations, like what has happened in Ebola and coronavirus. But generally, bats are great for our environment and help out, especially here in the United States with um, insect suppression. And last, just remember they have low reproductive rates. They're not like rodents where they just give birth to a bunch of young. Most bats only give birth to one young a year, and not every individual is going to survive. So that makes when they have a big threat hit them, like getting a portion of their population getting hit by wind turbines, or how white nose decimated some of these caves, these low reproductive rates makes it really hard for these populations to bounce back. Okay, that was a ton of information about bats, and this is a major pivot in this presentation that I added recently, just because you have some cool rare mammals in South Georgia that I am hoping to get to work with at some point, but never have. So I just wanted to add them to the presentation. And then we'll get back to it at the end, and we can ask questions about all the bat stuff and all the small mammal stuff as well. So one of the first ones I want to talk about is the round-tailed muskrat. I'm sure you've seen or heard of muskrats before, and you think of something kind of big. These guys are pretty small, like kind of like just a really large rat size instead of the size of like the eastern muskrat. And these guys are only found in South Georgia and Florida. So Georgia is as north as the range gets, and they're pretty much isolated to the Okefenokee. So keeping that habitat is amazing for this species. They like shallow, grassy marshes and wetlands, and they build these dome-shaped homes with grasses and sedges, like near the swamps that they'll live in, and then they'll go out and forage in these swamps. And they have small home ranges, so they pretty much stick to one area. And they'll go out and forage, and they mainly consume aquatic plant material and roots and stems of those plants. But like pretty much everything that's rare, there are threats, especially with habitat loss with this guy. I think that's why it's so restricted to the Okefenokee, because that is a more pristine habitat. But there's a lot of coastal development and generally loss of wetlands in the United States. So I think that's why the range is so constricted. And of course, invasive plants and predators in those areas. I think in Florida, they have python problem, probably could potentially affect these guys. Any invasive snakes or other reptiles that could eat them, and then invasive plants encroaching on their habitats. That in turn could have changes in hydrology. So if the area is dammed up, downstream, what could be a nice little wetland could dry up. So just doing general good wetland habitat management would benefit these guys. Another really cool one, small mammal, is a star-nosed mole. It's found in the eastern U.S. It has quite a bit larger range than the wood rat, not the wood rat, the round-tailed muskrat has a larger range. It's not restricted to as small of an area, but they're just rare. I think just being moles in general makes it hard for us to get very many records on them. They're hard to study. But yeah, rare in Georgia, and they like wet soils, swampy areas, wetlands, floodplains, so similar types of habitats. and they'll build their tunnels underground, but they'll actually leave openings into the water, and they'll go swim and dive in the water to catch prey. They eat lots of little insects and things, and they have this weird nose, and what gives it its name, the star-nosed mole. But these tendrils on the nose, it helps them like feel around and sense prey. And something that I just read about earlier today, actually, that the star-nosed mole is one of 2 species of mammals in the whole world that can sniff underwater. So they will let a little air out of their mouth, and I guess it catches particles in the water, and then they're able to sniff that air before letting those little air bubbles float to the surface. So it lets out their mouth, kind of senses the environment, and then they can smell. So they follow their prey by letting out that little bit of air and then smelling it to follow prey in the water. Pretty fascinating. And these guys are mainly affected by habitat loss, just general loss of wetland habitat in Georgia. Another one that's found in southern Georgia, the southeastern pocket gopher. There are different species of pocket gopher throughout the country, but the southeastern pocket gopher is only found in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. And they occur more in longleaf pine forests with sandy soils. So these guys are a little bit different than the other 2 that prefer those really wet soils. These guys are in a little bit sandier, drier soils. And they build these large, intricate tunnels underground with many chambers. And they're basically solitary, and they run around. They eat roots and rhizomes, tubers of plants in their tunnels mainly. And pretty much their whole life is underground. They don't come out above ground very often. And so they have little food caches and bedding and foraging tunnels all underground. So this is one that I've never worked with either, because they're just difficult to capture. Threats, habitat degradation and loss. So again, just general habitat loss. Those pine leaf ecosystems just aren't as common anymore throughout Georgia. A lot of it's been converted to agriculture or development. And then we don't have a lot of prescribed fire anymore. Georgia DNR does a pretty good job with burning our lands that need it and keeping some of this great habitat. But generally, in what we used to have in Georgia before all the development that we have now, it would have happened at a much larger scale. And then these guys also have low reproductive rates. So they maybe don't mate all the time like some other rodents, and their offspring, they don't have as many offspring that survive. The last one that I want to talk about is the eastern spotted skunk. Very cool species that not everybody knows about. They're much smaller than our normal skunks. These are like kind of like a kitten size, maybe a little bit bigger than a kitten, but pretty small for a skunk. They're found in the eastern US. And they're vulnerable and losing a lot of habitat as well, so they're not in great populations. They occur in dense forest stands with shrub cover, so they don't like it wide open, so they're not going to thrive in the same area that the pocket gophers are in those wide open pine stands. They like it to be a little more cluttered. And they make little burrows underground or take over other animals, probably armadillo burrows if they can. And they do this really cool behavior to deter predators to make themselves look bigger. And I'll show you a picture of that on the next slide. But they are mainly insect eaters, eating a lot of beetles and grasshoppers. But occasionally, especially in the wintertime when maybe there's less insect availability, they'll eat small mammals like mice, and occasionally eat berries or nuts. But here is one here doing his handstand to try to deter predators. Something alarmed him, so he's standing up trying to scare them away. But threats that they're facing, again, habitat destruction, agriculture and urban development. They are more likely to get hit by cars because they're running across roads. Sometimes we get records of this species because someone found it dead on the road or somebody hit it. Hunting or trapping, really, they're still considered a game species, even though they're not doing very well. And general persecution by humans because it's a skunk. People don't like skunks, just like people don't like bats. So yeah, those are some of the reasons that the species isn't doing very well. It used to be more widespread throughout Georgia, but now there's only 2 areas where we get regular sightings from, and it's around the Columbus area, and then like far northwest Georgia, we have some sightings. We have a couple populations. I'm hoping to do some work soon to find out if they're using some of our WMA and DNR properties in that Columbus area. Okay, kind of just jumping around a little bit, going back to bats, but what can you do for bats? You can always donate. We have great groups like Bat Conservation International and the Southeastern Bat Diversity Network, both great groups that do good research and just have a good community of bat biologists. And just generally donating and supporting your public lands, that's really going to benefit all of our species here in Georgia. It's just recognizing the importance of public lands and just supporting it. You can always raise awareness, volunteer. We have the Georgia Bat Working Group that meets every year, and we have bat blitzes where a bunch of bat biologists come together to catch bats. And members of the public come to those as well when we have events going on. And also volunteering with our acoustic project that I mentioned earlier. If you want to do one of our acoustic driving routes next summer, let me know. I can get you on the list and find a route near you that needs to be run. Refrain from excluding bats during pup season. So I get calls all summer long about bats in people's attics, but they're vulnerable when they create a maternity colony in someone's home or attic. And when the pups are born, the pups are pretty helpless. They can't fly. They get there really quickly, so it only takes them about 3 to 4 weeks to fly, but we don't know the exact period when all the pups are being born. So generally between like April 1st to August 1st, we encourage people not to exclude bats from their attics at that time to protect those maternity colonies. This is a different story if bats are getting in your living space. I understand if bats are flying around your living room or your kitchen or bedroom, whatever, that could be more of a human health hazard if you get bit by that bat or being in that close of contact with one. So that's different. But when they're just in the attic and they're not hurting anybody, not getting into the main part of your home, leaving them until August 1st before getting somebody to help you with the removal process is best for that population. And be spore aware. So that's talking about white nose syndrome. Since white nose syndrome is a fungus, it produces by spores. So if you went into a cave that is white nose positive, or at least positive for the fungus, then you could be taking those spores with you wherever you go. This is mainly something we try to preach to cavers, people who like to go spelunking, that just clean your gear in between sites so you're not transferring that around. And locally in your own backyard, you can always create a bat garden. Planting native plants always will promote native insects to be using them. Growing organic with no pesticides, because pesticides are obviously going to kill those insects that the bats need. But you can always install a bat house like this one here. We have specs on our website of how to put up a bat house properly in your yard that is most likely to get bats. And then a big one, keep your cats indoors. Outdoor cats kill bats all the time, kill a lot of our native birds, and they're not eating them because they're getting fed by their owners, but just generally cats outdoors is not great for the environment. And if you do decide, just really quickly, I could give you a few things to look at when buying a bat house and placing it. Uh, this one has mesh here at the bottom. It's not great. That mesh always ends up falling off. The bats can get tangled in it and stuff. So just having a wood back that you can rough up, even just like putting some little scratches in it, just as long as the wood is rough enough for the bats to climb up, it doesn't need much. Bat houses tend to do better when they're painted, and there's a guide of what shade of paint to paint them based on where you're located in the United States, but always using bat-friendly chemicals, so water-based paints with low VOC. Staining is bad because stains can have fumes that are not great for the bats in those little houses. And placement is key. Always placing bat houses in areas with 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. If they're too shaded and bats put a maternity colony in there, then those pups aren't going to do very well in a cooler area. But if you all on this call are in South Georgia, you're probably not going to have to worry about a bat house getting too cold. So for small mammals, what can you do to support small mammals? It's not as easy as just putting a bat house in their yard and trying to help them. But again, supporting public land and conservation is always beneficial to all of our species, but small mammals too. You can donate to programs, just spread awareness of some of the things we talked about and the importance of these animals in our ecosystem and what things can potentially be threats or harming their populations. And then you can always volunteer. We're starting a small mammal working group in Georgia. Very early, we don't really have a lot going on yet, but it's always something that you can look into in the future. Avoid using harmful chemicals, pesticide, herbicide. Pesticides, especially like rodenticide, is really harmful. Obviously, it's killing the animals that are eating it, but that poison is so harmful that it moves up the chain. So if you're using a pesticide to get rid of rats around your house, restaurant, business, whatever, and those rats die from that pesticide, and then another animal comes along and eats that dead rat, it will poison the other animal as well. So this is really bad in the bird world of pesticides getting into birds of prey and killing them because people didn't think that it would move that far down the line. Control domestic animals, same kind of with leaving your cat outside. Just don't let dogs, cats just be running around killing all of our native species. And drive carefully. I know that's like kind of easy to say. It's not always super easy to avoid hitting the animal running across the road, but just be aware at nighttime and try to keep an eye out for these guys. This I can go leave up if anybody wants to get any more information on bats of Georgia. We have a ton of information on our website, as well as Bat Conservation International and the SBDN website. I can go back to that here in a second, but I just wanted to play this video. And if anybody has questions for me, I can stop sharing my screen and open it up to questions about bats or other small mammals in the States or what I do. I don't have anything going this afternoon, so as long as you guys want to ask questions, I'm available.
Well, I think I see now the mistake we made with the bat house we put up back in, I don't know, 2009. The bats never went to it. Doesn't get enough sunlight.
It's in a shaded area.
Yep.
Yeah, they need to get some light. And sometimes bats are picky. So if they already have a nice roost somewhere in your neighborhood, they might not move there until they can't access that roost anymore. But sunlight, and also they don't really do very well on trees generally. You would think because bats like to go up under bark, that putting on the tree would kind of simulate that, but it doesn't. They don't tend to be productive if you put them on a tree.
Well, this one is on its own 4x4 post, 16 feet up. But there are trees around it, so it's probably just too shady.
Yeah, could be.
They live around here somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah. I don't know. It could be some of the tree species too. They're really hard to see because they'll roost at the very tip top of trees, especially pine trees, the Seminole bat. At least the ones that I studied, they would be sometimes almost 30 meters up in the tree.
Hmm.
I have one in a bat house, or I mean, I have a bat house in a very sunny location on the face of my barn, but I think the bats around me just stick to the swamp.
Yeah, it could be. If you have great habitat and especially swampy areas nearby, um, swamps normally have a bunch of snags, so there's usually good bark that's like sloughing off of those trees, and there's probably some good bat roosts in the swamp. But sometimes bat houses will get used by a couple individuals and not a whole colony. And if they're not there for a long time, it might be hard to notice. So you could both still be having some bats visit them, but unless you have a huge colony in there, you're not really going to notice.
Any chance we could get a copy of your slides?
Yeah, I could send them to you.
Can we publish them?
I don't know. Not all of these photos are mine, so that is my only concern. Publishing the slides because I don't like star-nosed mole and things like that aren't my own photos, and some of those bats from all over the world are my own photos. So I would be hesitant.
Do you have a PDF that we could publish that's similar to what you presented today?
Yeah, I could probably get you something that, yeah. Is there specific information that you would want to publish? Because we have different PDFs, but might not have everything like consolidated into one.
It's just a supplemental picture thing that would be available if someone clicked on that and watched a webinar. It would be just supporting documents. So, I mean,
Okay.
it's whatever is okay for us to publish. If there's something that the state already has or whatever that you
Yeah,
can
yeah. Yeah, I can send you that as soon as we get off of this call. I'll send you a bunch of information.
Okay.
A bunch of those small mammals I never heard of, like that small skunk. I had no idea.
Me
Yeah,
either.
we just got a report from somebody that I don't think also never heard of one, and they said that they saw a polka dotted skunk because they had never heard of the spotted skunk. Yeah, and its populations are pretty isolated to some areas. I think the closest down towards you guys would be like the Columbus area. Yeah, but hopefully I can do some more like camera trapping surveys in the future, and maybe we can find out where they're all at.
All righty.
Thank you for doing this for us today.
Of course, I always love talking about bats and mammals.
We liked listening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for everyone attending also.
I enjoyed it.